Anyway, our final topic of the night: feminism, the bone of scorn for the internet. It seems over the last few years. Once again, you can begin. What are your views on feminism?
Well, I think that on the issue of, say, catcalling, to start off with, is not a national, federal crime. It's more of a first world problem than anything. Somebody just randomly giving you a comment. Like sexual assault, not acceptable, obviously, but catcalling, I think that people should just be getting a thicker skin. This would be the case of the women, or even if men were like being harassed by a woman, or even a gay man about how good they look, they should get the thicker skin as well. But of course, the subject is feminism and females. And yes, the gender pay gap. That despite whatever anecdotes you might want to bring up, nationally, or at least here in the United States, I'm speaking for the United States. I do not know how specifically it is in other countries, but the reason why there is a gender pay gap, or as War Corp 666 would define it as an earnings gap. Like at the end of the year, men earn more than women in total. The reason for that being is because it's based off of the median income of everybody in the groups. The two groups being man versus woman. And that you have the combined income of all of them, and then the total income is divided by the amount of people, and that is how you get your median income. That is what I have seen the gender pay gap was based off of. And the reason why men have a higher median income is because normally men take the harder jobs, like manufacturing, for example, or lumberjacks, or and if there is a women in these fields or similar fields, it is mostly like an office job or something like that. Yes, if never mind. I've gone on long enough. I'll let you speak now.
Okay, some interesting points. So firstly, catcalling is very all well and good calling it a first world problem, supposedly. But I think that just because something is worse in other parts of the world doesn't make it a legitimate issue in this part of the world. And a first world problem is still a problem. And for me, I prefer the first world problem should be a term used for like little trivial things, not something that is serious like catcalling. So the whole problem with it is that.
Wait, sorry, I was looking at the chat there. You said that were you essentially agreeing with me that catcalling is not that big of an issue?
No, it is an issue in my opinion. It represents sexist attitudes towards women, like because it shows that essentially people still view them as objects and they're just commenting on their appearance, and you don't need to express that. You're essentially sexualizing people you've never even met before. And ruining or affecting their day. And in the context of the society we live in, where sexual assault and rape and harassment are real things that happen, it causes distress and panic because you never know whether the person who catcalls you is then going to do something more, is going to follow you, or even worse.
Well, punish the rape and not the expression of a compliment.
But it's not a compliment, is it, though? Because all you said is that you're sexually attracted to them. Or
saying that you look good is not a compliment?
Well, yeah, but just like yelling at someone on the street, like, and just saying like sexually, like pervasive things to people who have no concern for you, it's ridiculous. It's unfair. It shouldn't be happening because it's essentially treating women as sexual objects when there's no necessary need for it. People should be able to not view women as just something to yell things at. And yeah, fine, it happens to men somewhat as well, but nowhere near in the same proportion that it does to women. And coming on to what you said about the gender pay gap, and yeah, technically it is. It isn't as like the way it is. It's not as it has sometimes been misreported, but there is still a gap in areas. There are still gaps in the way women and men are paid, but also there are societal factors which make it clear that why men are more likely to end up in certain roles and why men make up certain jobs positions. Like it's like, for instance, the way men and boys and girls are brought up, the way hiring of these jobs works. Like it's more to it than just men do hard jobs, therefore it's natural they get paid more. Like
Yeah.
it's a more complex issue than that, I feel. So I think it's quite unfair to just sort of say, oh well, it's just because men are like this and that's the way it is. Because there's and also like we come on with that sort of stuff, we come on to the issue of like job-based discrimination and stuff, and the high numbers of women who face abuse and stuff and like discrimination at their workplace.
I got a question for you.
Yeah.
Do you know of any studies that mention specific numbers of how many women are, well, actually, even that is kind of hard to analyze. For you to be, you would have to have somebody observing 24/7 in the workforce how much a woman is getting paid and how much a man is getting paid, but then you would have to see like in the same work field, like say for example, a woman working a desk job and a man working in a desk job. And then you would have to have somebody like a bureaucratic worker or something like that observing 24/7 or while on the job anyways, at all times while they're on the job, of how hard each one is working. So I was about to ask you if there was a study that goes talking about the specific amounts of women who get paid less despite doing the same amount of work in the same fields, working just as hard as their male counterparts. But then again, I thought to myself that would be hard to observe.
Well, if I want, I don't have a study to hand, but I could probably quite easily find one. There have been numerous studies done onto this, and they do find generally that there are issues in workplaces, and even studies which show that even the studies which show that gender pay gap is more of an earnings gap, and there are more nuances to it. They concede that there are issues with the way women and men are treated at work and stuff. But I think there's even more to the need for feminism than just how much they're paid and stuff. Like we could look at the way rape is dealt with, and like sexual assault and stuff. We look at the way rape victims are dealt with, where often they aren't believed and they have lies made up about them.
Rape is not a business-specific subject.
Sorry?
I said rape is not a business-specific subject. Like that is not because of the manager. Like unless the manager is the rapist.
I meant in general. Sorry, I meant like I was sort of moving beyond the gender sort of workplace stuff.
I kind of feel like that we are. I kind of feel like that we were veering off of the gender pay gap. What, are you done with that subject?
Well, not entirely done with it, but I was more just sort of because I want to be a little bit less, spend a little bit less time on feminism than on the other one. Like perhaps we're gonna have a more full-length discussion on this another time. But I was just sort of doing with sort of things I think feminism is still relevant for.
Feminism was the last subject that I wanted to briefly touch on. If you was one to talk about, say, for example, religion versus atheism or climate change or any other subject, the Native American genocide, maybe, I wanted to kind of save that for another day.
Yeah, no, I completely agree.
I mean, I especially want to let you get to bed for whatever you might have in the morning.
Yeah, gosh, because it's 10:01 now in the UK. So, but no, I suppose to sort of wrap up, I see sexually, politically, emotionally and stuff, we still have gender inequalities, and it's important to fight them. But I think we'll sort of draw it to a close in a second. So you sort of give your brief views on feminism and stuff, and then we'll sort of end and have a like little farewell and stuff.
Yeah, and okay, so closing statement. You briefly mentioned of how politically it is unequal amongst sexes. Like the issue of women, of how many women are in politics, isn't an issue in of itself. Now, obviously, you're going to be thinking to yourself that it's a sign of how much women are not represented, and because they're not being represented enough, their ideals are not being put into effect enough. But there are feminist men, like if that is who you prefer to be running the country, as feminists. And again, catcalling, not a big issue, and public breastfeeding as well. I do not think any legislative action should be taken either way on that issue. I mean, it is not a big deal if a woman was to at least take a blanket. I do not have a real issue with women public breastfeeding, but I have an issue against public nudity personally. And it isn't too much of an effort for a woman to just cover themselves up with a blanket and so forth. And gender pay gap, I pretty much covered that issue. Yeah, I say that it doesn't exist on a national scale. I mean, yes, there will be anecdotes of, say, my mother or my aunt, or I am paid less than my male counterparts for the same exact work and the same effort in it, in the same field. But nationally, it doesn't exist. That's what I'll say.
Well, I'll touch on a few of those things just quickly, obviously, before we end. I think that catcalling, as I've already said, there's more to it than just a compliment. It affects how people feel, and feelings are obviously important because people being unhappy in society isn't a good thing. We need to sort of move past the idea that it's just people saying things how they like, because if that's the case, if we're just trying to please people, then what about the people who are being affected by it? What about the people who are worried that there'll be more, that it's weird having men make leering comments towards you? Because it's not something that makes you feel good having weirdos follow you around and say oh, you look good today, because well, no, that means you're viewing me sexually, and that's a bit weird if you're just walking past on the street and you can't help but yell it out.
Because that'll be the first thing that you'll notice about a person is how they look. Yeah,
but then what? So you just impulsively have to say it, and it's if you.
I wouldn't say that necessarily.
Well, but some people do. Some people feel the need to just comment on someone else's appearance, and given that rape and sexual assault and stuff, they're still pretty big issues in society. Sadly, you can not be surprised. It's not that uncalled for someone to be a bit worried of someone who is doing that. I'm trying to remember what else you said. Politics, I think, I don't know if you know what substantive and descriptive representation is, but in an ideal world, substantive description would be how we elect our officials, where what you say and what you think is what gets you elected. But we have to consider that education is not equal, and we still have sexism in society. Therefore, because of the lack of women in a lot of parliament and politics and government and stuff, there are still issues with sexism in politics, and the hiring processes and stuff are flawed. I'm trying to think what else you said. I may just sort of conclude it with saying, but I think that feminism is pretty crucial, and especially with the sort of people we're seeing on the rise at the moment, the far right, and people like Donald Trump and stuff, I think it's important to be wary of sexism and be supportive of feminism. But that is where we're going to end it today. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you to you, Zach, for a pretty fun, interesting debate. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did.
Yeah, I did. I'm glad that we could keep it at a decent level instead of contribute to the internet cancer that is on YouTube.
Well, exactly. And certainly I hope to do another debate on some other topics and stuff with you again, because it'll be interesting.
Probably will.
Well, exactly. No, it'll be interesting to have another one. So I want to thank everyone for watching. It's been 2 hours. So if you watched all of this, then thank you for sticking with us. And we'll see you all again next time. Check out Zach's channel, because I'm sure he's got other stuff in there. I'll be watching a few of his videos myself. And we'll see you next time.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.